Welcome, travelers. Today you stand in a forest that remembers when humans were not yet human. These trees rose before empires, before language, before the first cities carved themselves into stone. Some have lived for 2,000 years, older than nations, older than most gods. They have weathered fire and flood and drought, and still they grow, adding one silent ring each year to their ancient hearts. And yet, tonight, they do not sleep. Neither do you. You arrived here carrying the noise of the world, the hum of screens, the weight of decisions unmade, the restlessness that follows you into every darkened room. But here, in the cathedral silence of the Redwood forest, something shifts. The air tastes older. The light moves differently. Even your breath seems to slow without asking permission. You are in the land of ancient redwood giants, the tallest living things on earth, guardians of fog and time. Tonight, you will discover what it means to rest in a place that has been resting for millennia. You will walk among giants who grow in silence. You will breathe air filtered through needles that have watched centuries pass. And somewhere between the mist and the moss, between the creek and the canopy, you will remember that stillness is not the absence of life. It is life's oldest language. Before we begin, take a slow breath. If this journey brings you peace, let the path stay open. Subscribe to Rest with the Wild, and we will meet again when the world feels too loud. Now, close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest, half open, on the shapes of trees that tower beyond sight. You are here, and the forest has been waiting. You open your eyes, or perhaps they were never closed, and the world around you hums with a silence so deep it has texture. The redwoods rise, not like trees, like pillars holding up the sky itself. Their trunks are wider than rooms, their bark thick and furrowed like the skin of the earth turned inside out. Some are scarred black from fires centuries old, yet they stand unbothered, wrapped in moss, the color of memory. You tilt your head back, following one trunk upward, but it disappears into mist before you can find its crown. Somewhere, 30 stories above, green needles drink the fog. The ground beneath your feet is soft, not dirt, something older. Centuries of fallen needles, rotted logs, mushrooms blooming in slow explosions of white and orange. Ferns rise in clusters, their fronds unfurling like hands opening after long prayer. You step carefully, and the forest floor absorbs the sound. Nothing echoes here. Everything is swallowed, held, composted into silence. The air is cool, not cold. Cool the way stone is cool in summer shade. It carries moisture, the scent of bark and soil and something faintly sweet, like vanilla hidden in wood. You breathe it in, and it fills your chest differently than city air. Heavier, richer alive. Light filters down in scattered beams. The canopy is so dense that sunlight becomes a rumor by the time it reaches you. What arrives is softer, cathedral light, the kind that makes dust motes visible, that paints the trunks in gradients of gold and shadow. You move through one of these beams, and for a moment, you are illuminated. Then the mist closes in again, and you dissolve back into the green twilight. A creek runs nearby. You hear it before you see it. A low, constant murmur threading through the silence. You follow the sound, stepping over roots thick as your body, ducking beneath branches draped in lichen like old lace. The water appears suddenly clear and quick, tumbling over stones worn smooth by centuries of friction. You kneel beside it. The cold shocks your fingertips. You cup a handful and let it spill back, watching the ripples fade. Around you, the forest breathes. Not metaphorically, literally. The redwoods pull fog from the air, condensing it on their needles, dripping it down their trunks in slow rivers that feed the soil. Each tree is a rainmaker, a cloud thief, a well that drinks from the sky. You watch a droplet form on a low branch, swell, tremble, then fall, disappearing into the moss below without a sound. Above, something moves. A bird, small, brown, quick, darts between branches. A wren, perhaps, or a thrush. It lands on a trunk 20 feet up, cocks its head, then vanishes into a crack in the bark. The forest is full of hidden lives. Salamanders beneath logs, beetles boring through dead wood, fungi threading through the soil like neurons in a vast, slow brain. You walk deeper. The path, if it can be called a path, winds between the giants. There is no hurry here. Time moves differently beneath these trees. A decade is a breath, a century a season. You pass one redwood whose base has been hollowed by ancient fire, creating a cave large enough to stand inside. The interior is black, smooth, warm despite the cool air outside. You step in. The world narrows to this charred chamber, this womb of ash and survival. You place your palm against the inner wall. Still alive. The tree is still alive. Somewhere above, a branch creaks. Not from wind. There is almost no wind here. Not at ground level, not beneath the canopy's weight. The sound is the forest adjusting, settling, the slow conversation of wood and gravity. You listen. The creak fades. Silence returns, thicker than before. The mist drifts. It moves like something half alive, threading between trunks, pooling in hollows, rising and falling with no apparent pattern. Sometimes it thickens until you can barely see 10 feet ahead. Other times it parts, and suddenly you glimpse the full height of a tree, impossibly tall, impossibly old, before the fog swallows it again. You are not alone. Deer move through the understory, stepping carefully, their eyes dark and calm. They do not startle when they see you. You are just another shape in the forest, another breathing thing. One doe pauses, chewing a mouthful of fern, then continues on. Her fawn follows, all legs and curiosity, nosing at a fallen branch before bounding after its mother. The light is fading, or perhaps it never truly arrived. Day and night blend here. The canopy filters everything into a perpetual dusk, a green-gold gloaming that makes hours irrelevant. You could walk for minutes or days, and the forest would look the same. Ancient, patient, indifferent to your passing. But it is not indifferent. It is present. Every tree, every fern, every stone in the creek. They are all here, fully, completely, in a way the human world has forgotten how to be. They do not rush toward tomorrow, or regret yesterday. They simply are, rooted in this moment that has been unfolding for 2,000 years. You find a fallen log and sit. The wood is soft beneath you, yielding slightly, already halfway to becoming soil. Mushrooms sprout from one end, small, white, delicate as porcelain. You rest your hands on your knees and let your shoulders drop. The forest holds you the way water holds a stone, not lifting, not pressing, simply surrounding. Somewhere in the canopy, a raven calls. The sound is sharp, brief, then absorbed by the green silence. Another answers from farther away. Then nothing. Just the creek's constant whisper and the slow drip of condensation finding its way to earth. Your breathing slows. You did not decide this. It simply happened. The forest's rhythm replacing yours. The way a heartbeat sinks to a partner's in sleep. In, slow. Out, slower. The mist curls around your ankles. The redwoods stand. And somewhere inside you, something you have been carrying begins to loosen its grip. This is the land of ancient giants, and tonight, for a little while, you belong to it. You sit among trees that remember a world you cannot imagine. Before these giants learned to touch the sky, before they claimed this narrow strip of California and Oregon coast, they lived everywhere. Redwoods, or their ancient relatives, once covered continents. They grew in Greenland when Greenland was green. They shaded dinosaurs in what would become Nevada, China, Europe. The family Sequoioidea spread across the northern hemisphere like a slow green tide, adapting, evolving, thriving in warmth and moisture. That was 150 million years ago, the Jurassic period, when ferns grew tall as houses and the air hummed with insects the size of birds. The first redwoods rose then, not quite as we know them now, but close enough. Tall, thick-barked, built to endure. They watched the continents drift. They survived the asteroid that ended the age of giants. They outlasted ice ages and climate shifts that erased entire ecosystems. But slowly the world grew colder, drier. The redwoods retreated. One by one, the forests vanished. Europe's redwoods disappeared during the last ice age, unable to migrate south past the Alps and Pyrenees. Asia's dwindled to a single species, the dawn redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides, thought extinct until 1944, when a small grove was discovered in a remote valley in China. North America's giant sequoias, Sequoiadendron giganteum, withdrew to scattered groves in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And the coast redwoods, Sequoia sempervirens, the tallest trees on Earth, found refuge here. In this narrow band of fog-drenched coast, barely 30 miles wide and 450 miles long, stretching from Big Sur to southern Oregon. This strip of land where the Pacific's cold current meets warm inland air, where fog rolls in almost daily, where winter rains drench the soil and summer mist keeps everything alive. Here they survived. The redwood beside you has lived through all of it, not this individual tree. It is younger, perhaps only 800 years old. But its lineage stretches back to when the world was unrecognizable. The genetic memory coded in its cells remembers climates that no longer exist, forests that have turned to coal, companions that vanished into stone. You place your hand on its bark. Beneath your palm, centuries of growth rings spiral inward toward the tree's first year. Each ring a summer and a winter, each ring a story of rain or drought, fire or peace, growth or survival. The outer rings are narrow. The tree grows more slowly now, its energy devoted to height rather than girth. The inner rings, near the heartwood, are wider. Those were the years of youth, of rapid expansion, of claiming space in the canopy. These trees should not be possible. Gravity should defeat them. Water should refuse to climb 300 feet from root to crown. Wind should snap them like matchsticks. And yet they stand, some rising over 380 feet, taller than the Statue of Liberty, higher than a 30-story building. They achieve this through engineering humans are still trying to understand. The bark is the first defense. You run your fingers along it, thick, fibrous, soft despite its appearance. Redwood bark can grow up to 12 inches thick, insulating the living wood beneath from fire, disease, and temperature extremes. It contains almost no resin, unlike pine or fir, so it does not fuel flames. Instead, it chars on the outside while protecting the cambium layer within, the thin band of living tissue that carries nutrients and water throughout the tree. Fire-scarred trunks are not wounds. They are resumes, evidence of survival. The tree you are touching has burned at least twice. You can see the blackened cave at its base, the vertical channels carved by flames that rose and then exhausted themselves. But the tree did not die. It sealed the damaged tissue, rerouted its vascular system, and continued growing. Some redwoods are hollow for 20 feet up their trunks, burned out from the inside, yet still green and alive in the canopy above. The roots are the second secret. Redwoods do not have taproots. They do not drill deep into the earth. like oaks or pines. Instead, their roots spread horizontally, reaching out in all directions, forming networks just 4 to 6 feet below the surface. A single tree's roots might extend 100 feet from its trunk, and where they meet the roots of neighboring trees, they intertwine, they fuse, they become structurally inseparable. This is how they stand against storms, not through individual strength, but through collective anchoring. A redwood forest is not a collection of trees. It is a single interconnected organism braced against itself, holding the ground together. When wind comes screaming off the Pacific, the forest bends as one. When landslides threaten, the root networks hold the hillside in place. You are not standing among trees. You are standing inside one vast living system that has learned to survive together. The third secret is water. Lifting moisture 300 feet should be impossible. Capillary action and root pressure can only account for movement up to about 30 feet. Beyond that, physics seems to say no, but the redwoods found a way. They drink the fog. The needles in the canopy are designed to catch moisture from the air. Each needle has a waxy coating that causes water vapor to condense on contact. The fog rolls in, thick, cold, dense with Pacific moisture, and the needles trap it. Droplets form, they merge, they grow heavy, and then they fall, dripping down through the canopy, soaking the bark, feeding the roots. A single large redwood can capture 40 gallons of water from fog in a single day. Multiply that by thousands of trees, and the forest creates its own rain. The redwoods summon the moisture they need from the air itself, pulling clouds apart and turning them into groundwater. In summer, when California's rivers run low and the hills turn golden, the redwood forest stays green, fed by fog, watered by mist. You tilt your head back and watch the process unfold. A wall of fog moves through the canopy like a living thing. The needles disappear into white. Then, slowly, you hear it. The soft patter of droplets beginning to fall. Not rain, fog drip, the forest watering itself. You stand and walk again. The forest floor is a graveyard and a nursery, a place where death and life have stopped pretending to be separate. Everywhere you look, fallen trees lie in slow decay. Some fell decades ago and are now covered in moss, their bark peeling away to reveal soft red wood beneath. Others fell centuries ago and have become something else entirely, nurse logs, their bodies hosting new life. You approach one such log. It is massive, 30 feet long and 6 feet wide, lying perpendicular to the slope. Along its length, a row of young redwoods has sprouted, saplings 10, 20, 30 feet tall, their roots draped over the log's flanks like fingers clutching the earth. The original tree, dead for perhaps 200 years, is feeding them. Its wood breaking down into nutrients, its elevated position giving the saplings a head start, lifting them above the ferns and sorrel that carpet the forest floor. This is how redwood groves expand. When a giant falls, it does not simply rot away, it becomes a foundation. Dozens of seeds germinate on its trunk, where moisture collects and competition from other plants is minimal. Most will die. A few will survive, and if they are lucky, they will grow tall enough to claim a gap in the canopy, a patch of light where the fallen giant once stood. In time, the nurse log will vanish completely, decomposed into soil, but the young trees will remain, standing in a perfectly straight line, a ghost of the body that gave them life. You kneel beside the log and press your palm into the moss. It is soaked, spongy, alive with moisture. Tiny insects move through it. Springtails, mites, creatures too small to name. The moss itself is not one plant, but dozens of species, layered and interwoven, each claiming its own microhabitat. Beneath the moss, the wood is soft, almost spongy. You press harder, and your fingers sink an inch deep. This is not decay. This is transformation. The forest does not waste anything. Every fallen needle becomes part of the soil. Every broken branch feeds fungi. Every dead tree hosts beetles, salamanders, woodpeckers, owls. The standing dead trees, called snags, are especially valuable. Their wood, still firm, provides nesting cavities for dozens of species. Woodpeckers drill into them. Owls claim the holes. Bats roost in the cracks. Flying squirrels nest in the hollows. A single snag might support 15 different animal species over the decades it takes to finally collapse. And when it does collapse, the cycle begins again. Nurse log, seedling, sapling, tree, snag, nurse log. The forest eats itself and is reborn endlessly, without waste. You rise and move deeper still. The light has shifted. Dimmer now, the sun lower somewhere beyond the canopy. The forest takes on a different quality in the growing dusk. Shadows deepen, colors mute. The green becomes almost blue, the brown almost black. But life does not stop. A banana slug inches across a fern frond. It is bright yellow, impossibly so, like a piece of fruit that learned to crawl. It moves slowly, leaving a trail of slime that glistens in the fading light. The slug is both decomposer and prey, eating dead plant matter, converting it into nutrients while serving as food for salamanders, shrews, and the occasional raccoon. You watch it for a moment, mesmerized by its slowness. In a world that demands speed, the slug has refused. It moves at the pace of the forest itself, deliberate, unhurried, certain that it will arrive where it needs to be. A Pacific chorus frog clings to a moss-covered stone. It is small, barely larger than your thumb. Its skin mottled brown and green for camouflage. It watches you with golden eyes, throat pulsing gently. At night, when the forest fills with fog and darkness, this frog will sing. Its call, a harsh rising ribbit, will join the chorus of dozens of others, creating a soundscape that has filled this forest for millennia. But now, in the quiet, it simply waits. You step over a log and surprise a marbled murrelet. The bird startles, wings flashing as it launches itself into the understory, weaving between trunks with impossible agility. It is a seabird, a diver built for plunging into ocean waves to catch fish. But it nests here, in the redwood canopy, on moss-covered branches 200 feet above the ground. For centuries, scientists did not know where these birds nested. They would see them flying inland at dawn and back to sea at dusk, but no nests were ever found. It was not until 1974 that a tree climber discovered the truth. Murrelets nest on wide branches in old-growth forest, placing their single egg directly on moss. No twigs, no lining, just moss and faith. The forest keeps secrets even from those who study it. You continue walking. The deer reappear, the doe and her fawn, browsing on sword ferns near a small clearing. The fawn is braver now, approaching within 10 feet, its dark eyes curious and calm. It sniffs the air, testing your scent, then decides you are not worth worrying about. It returns to grazing, tearing at fern fronds with soft lips. The doe watches you for a moment longer, then she too looks away. You are part of the forest now, another breathing thing, another presence in the green twilight. Not a threat, not an intruder, just here. You notice something carved into a tree, not graffiti, something older, a series of blackened marks, vertical lines cut deep into the bark, now partially healed over. You approach and run your fingers along them. The edges are charred, the wood inside is dark. Lightning. The tree was struck perhaps a century ago. The bolt traveled down its trunk, superheating the moisture inside, causing the bark to explode outward in strips. But the tree did not die. It sealed the wound with new growth, year by year, until only this scar remains, a record of violence and survival. Fire is not the enemy here. It is part of the cycle. Low-intensity fires sparked by lightning would sweep through these forests every few decades before humans arrived. They burned the understory, the ferns, the fallen branches, the young trees, but left the giants mostly untouched. The thick bark protected them. The high canopy was out of reach. These fires were not destructive, they were cleansing. They cleared competition, returned nutrients to the soil, opened space for new growth. The redwoods evolved with fire. They expect it, they need it. But then, humans changed the equation. For a century, fire was suppressed, every spark extinguished, every flame fought. The belief was that fire was always destruction, always loss. But without fire, the understory thickened, dead wood accumulated. Competing trees, Douglas firs, tan oaks, hemlocks, crowded in, creating ladder fuels that could carry flames into the canopy. Now when fires come, they burn hotter, higher, more catastrophically. The forest that evolved with fire now faces fire it was never meant to survive. You look around at the giants surrounding you. Each one has survived fires. Each one carries scars. But they are not indestructible. Push any system far enough beyond its adapted limits, and it will break. The redwoods have survived for 150 million years, but they are not guaranteed another century. You find a fallen giant. Not recently fallen. This tree has been down for decades, perhaps longer. Its trunk is massive, 20 feet in diameter, stretching away through the forest like a fallen column from an ancient temple. You climb onto it, finding footholds in the rough bark, and walk along its length. From this elevated position, the forest looks different. You can see farther, over the ferns, past the smaller trees. You can see how the forest arranges itself, how the giants claim their spaces with invisible boundaries, how the understory fills every gap with green. You sit on the trunk, your legs dangling over the side. And you try to imagine 2,000 years. The tree you are sitting on was already old when Rome fell. It was centuries established when the first European ships reached this coast. It stood here, accumulating rings, while empires rose and collapsed, while languages were born and died, while humans invented agriculture, writing, cities, flight, computers. And through all of it, the tree simply grew. One ring each year, that is all. One ring of summer wood, light and porous. One ring of winter wood, dark and dense, added to the previous ring, and the one before that, and the one before that, in a spiral that reaches back to a single seed that germinated in soil that barely exists anymore. The tree did not hurry, it did not worry. It did not question whether it was growing fast enough, tall enough, straight enough. It simply grew, one ring at a time, 1 year at a time, patient beyond measure. You lie back on the trunk. The bark presses into your shoulder blades. The mist settles on your face, cool and weightless. Above, the canopy is a cathedral ceiling of green and shadow, crossed by beams of fading light. You close your eyes, and for a moment you feel it, the deep time that these trees carry, the sense that your restlessness, your worries, your sleepless nights are tiny ripples on the surface of something much older and much calmer. The forest does not hurry, and neither, for this moment, do you. You are not the first to walk here. Long before European ships appeared on the horizon, long before the word Redwood existed in English, these forests were home. The Yurok, Tolowa, Karuk, Wiyot, Chilula, and dozens of other tribes lived among these giants for thousands of years. They did not simply survive here, they thrived, building cultures as complex and enduring as the trees themselves. They knew these trees intimately. The redwood, which they called by many names, each language holding its own word for the sacred giant, provided everything. They carved canoes from fallen logs, boats large enough to navigate ocean waves and river rapids. They split planks from the straight-grained wood to build homes, structures that could house entire extended families. They wove baskets from redwood roots. They used the bark for clothing, for bedding, for the walls of their sweat lodges. But they did not clear-cut. They did not take more than the forest could regenerate. They understood something that later arrivals would forget. The forest was not a resource to be extracted. It was a relationship to be maintained. When they needed a tree, they chose carefully. They thanked it. They used every part. And they knew that the forest would provide again, in its own time, if treated with respect. The redwood groves were sacred spaces, places of ceremony, places where the boundary between the human world and the spirit world grew thin. Some groves were so holy that only certain people, at certain times, for certain purposes, could enter. The trees were not just alive, they were elders. You think about this as you walk. The forest around you is older than the cultures that first named it. These trees were already ancient when the first humans arrived on this coast, following game and seasons and the promise of salmon-rich rivers. The people adapted to the forest. They learned its rhythms. They became part of its story. And for thousands of years, the forest and the people existed in balance. Everything changed in 1769. That was the year Spanish explorers first documented the coast redwoods. Palo Colorado, they called them. Red tree. They were astounded by the size, the height, the sheer abundance of timber stretching along the coast. But Spain was more interested in missions and trade routes than lumber. The trees remained largely untouched. Then came the gold rush. In 1849, thousands of people flooded into California. They needed housing, they needed mining timbers, they needed fuel, and suddenly, the redwoods were no longer sacred giants or even just trees. They were board feet, market value, wealth standing vertical, waiting to be converted into profit. The cutting began. At first, it was slow. Felling a redwood with hand saws and axes was brutal work. A single tree might take a week to bring down. 2 men would stand on springboards, planks inserted into notches cut above the buttressed base, and work a crosscut saw back and forth, until finally the giant groaned, cracked, and fell with a sound like thunder. Many trees shattered on impact. The wood was too brittle, the fall too violent. Loggers learned to build beds of smaller trees to cushion the landing. Even then, they might lose half the timber to breakage. But the demand was insatiable. San Francisco was burning and rebuilding, burning and rebuilding. The city needed lumber faster than ships could bring it from the East Coast. The redwoods were close. They were massive. A single tree could produce enough lumber to build an entire house. By the 1880s, steam donkey engines had arrived. Massive winches powered by boilers, capable of dragging logs up hillsides and through gulches. Railroads pushed into the forests, laying temporary tracks that could be moved as the cutting progressed. What once took a week now took a day. What once took a team of men now took a machine. The forests began to fall in earnest. Entire groves vanished. Hillsides were stripped bare, creeks filled with silt and debris. The salmon runs that had sustained indigenous peoples for millennia began to collapse. Their spawning grounds smothered, their cold water warmed by the loss of canopy shade. You pass a stump. It is enormous, 15 feet across, cut flat and level. The surface has weathered over decades, cracked and split, but you can still see the saw marks, parallel grooves where the blade bit through. You climb onto it and stand at the center. From this height, you can imagine the tree that once rose here, 30 stories tall, perhaps 1,500 years old. It survived droughts, fires, storms, everything the natural world could throw at it. But it could not survive 8 hours with a saw and a steam engine. You step down and continue walking. The forest around you is second growth, trees that sprouted after the original giants were logged. They are tall now, a century or more old, but they are not the same. The spacing is different. The diversity is reduced. The enormous nurse logs are gone, along with the snags, the ancient fallen giants, the complex architecture that took millennia to develop. This forest is younger than it looks, and quieter than it should be. By 1900, people began to notice what was being lost. Naturalists, scientists, and a growing conservation movement looked at the shrinking redwood forests and realized that something irreplaceable was vanishing. These were not just trees. They were living monuments to deep time, cathedrals of biology, ecosystems found nowhere else on Earth. And they were being cut at a rate of thousands of acres per year. The Save the Redwoods League was founded in 1918. 3 men, Madison Grant, Henry Fairfield Osborne, and John C. Merriam, stood in a newly logged redwood forest and made a decision. They would raise money to purchase groves and protect them as public parks. They would fight to preserve what remained before it was too late. It was an audacious plan. The logging companies owned most of the land. The timber was worth millions. Why would anyone sell standing trees when they could sell lumber? But the League persisted. They raised funds from individuals, from school children who donated pennies, from wealthy benefactors who saw the value in preservation. They negotiated with logging companies, sometimes purchasing groves at full market value, sometimes convincing owners to donate land in exchange for naming rights. Slowly, grove by grove, acre by acre, the protected areas grew. Prairie Creek, Redwood State Park. Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park, Humboldt Redwood State Park. Each one a sanctuary, a fragment of the original forest saved from the saw. But it was not enough. By the 1960s, over 90% of the original old-growth redwood forest had been logged. 2 million acres reduced to less than 200,000. And most of what remained was still in private hands, still vulnerable, still scheduled for cutting. The final battle was fought over a grove in Northern California, a valley called Redwood Creek, home to some of the tallest trees ever measured. You think about height as you walk. The redwood beside you is tall, perhaps 250 feet, which would make it one of the tallest trees in most forests. But here, in this remnant of old growth, it is merely average. The true giants are deeper in, farther from roads, harder to reach. The tallest redwood ever reliably measured was called Hyperion. It stands 380.3 feet tall, discovered in 2006 by naturalists Chris Atkins and Michael Taylor, bushwhacking through an unmarked section of Redwood National Park. Its exact location is kept secret to prevent damage from visitors. Even the scientists who study it approach carefully, knowing that soil compaction from too many feet could harm the shallow root system. Hyperion is not the only giant. Helios stands 377.7 feet. Icarus reaches 371.2 feet. Daedalus, Paradox, Fusion. The list goes on, each tree a superlative, each name an attempt to capture something that defies easy description. These trees are not just tall, they are impossibly tall. Gravity should prevent them from pumping water to such heights. Wind should snap them. Their own weight should crush them. But they stand, defying physics through adaptations refined over millions of years. You cannot see their crowns from the ground. The canopy is too high, too shrouded in mist. But scientists who have climbed them describe a different world up there. A vertical ecosystem with its own climate, its own species, its own rules. The upper canopy is dry and sunny, exposed to wind and weather. The mid-canopy is cooler, shaded, draped in lichen and moss. The lower canopy is dim and still, a transition zone between the forest floor and the sky. And throughout all of it, life thrives. In the crowns of the tallest redwoods, soil accumulates. Not soil from the ground, but soil made in the canopy, centuries of decomposed needles, bark, lichen, and debris piling up on wide horizontal branches. This canopy soil can be 3 feet deep. It holds moisture. It hosts ferns, shrubs, even small trees growing 200 feet above the ground. Entire salamanders live their entire lives up there, never touching the earth. Wandering salamanders, small, dark, adapted to climbing, hunt insects in the moss gardens of the canopy. They are arboreal, living in a 3-dimensional forest within the forest, moving from branch to branch, mating and laying eggs in moist crevices in the bark. You try to imagine it, standing on the forest floor, looking up into mist and green, knowing that above you, far beyond sight, entire ecosystems exist in the sky. Gardens suspended on branches, predators hunting in moss, water pooling in trunk hollows, creating aerial ponds where insects breed and frogs call. The forest is not one place. It is many places, stacked vertically, each with its own rhythm and rules. In 1968, after years of debate, protests, and political maneuvering, Redwood National Park was established. It was a compromise. The park protected some groves, but not all. Logging continued on adjacent private lands, and the runoff from clear-cuts threatened even the protected areas. It was not until 1978 that the park was expanded, adding 48,000 acres and creating buffer zones to protect watersheds. Even then, the damage was extensive. You walk through a section of the park that was logged before protection arrived. The stumps remain, scattered like gravestones. Second-growth trees rise between them, Douglas firs, hemlocks, young redwoods sprouting from the old stumps. The forest is returning, but it will take centuries to resemble what was lost. Still, there is hope in the recovery. Redwoods are resilient. When a tree is cut, new shoots, called sprouts, emerge from the stump, fed by the root system that remains alive underground. A single stump might produce 12 sprouts. Most will die, outcompeted by neighbours. But a few will survive, and over decades they will grow into a ring of trees surrounding the old stump. A fairy ring, some call it, though there is nothing magical about it. Just biology, just survival. You find one such ring, 8 trees, each trunk about 4 feet in diameter, arranged in a perfect circle around a decaying stump. You step into the center of the ring. The stump is soft, almost gone, colonized by mushrooms and moss. But the trees around you are vigorous, healthy, their canopies intertwined overhead. The original tree is gone, but its children remain. Can a forest be restored? It is the question that haunts conservationists. You can plant trees, and they will grow. But will they recreate the complexity of an old-growth forest? Will they develop the same structure, the same species diversity, the same ecological functions? The answer is partially, slowly, maybe. Young forests lack the features that define old growth. They lack the enormous fallen logs that serve as nurse logs. They lack the standing snags riddled with cavities. They lack the canopy soil, the arboreal salamanders, the marbled murrelets that nest only on wide moss-covered branches. They lack the sheer time required to develop these features. An old-growth forest is not just a collection of old trees. It is a system that has been developing for centuries, accumulating complexity, building relationships between species, creating structures that cannot be rushed. Scientists estimate that it takes 500 to 750 years for a redwood forest to develop old-growth characteristics. 500 years. That is longer than the United States has existed, longer than European colonization of this continent, longer than most human institutions survive. To restore these forests is to plant trees for people who will not be born for 20 generations. And yet, it is happening. Organizations are purchasing logged land and allowing it to regenerate. They are removing roads, restoring stream channels, reintroducing native plants. They are protecting young forests and giving them time. The one resource that cannot be manufactured, only granted. The work is slow. The results will not be seen in any of our lifetimes. But the trees do not measure time the way we do. You sit beside the creek again. The water has risen slightly, fed by fog drip from the canopy, by seeps emerging from the hillside. The sound is soothing, constant, the creek's voice unchanged by human presence or absence. And you think about what this forest offers beyond lumber. Carbon sequestration, for one. Redwoods store more carbon per acre than any other forest type on Earth. A single old-growth redwood can hold 250 tons of carbon in its wood, bark, and root system. Multiply that by thousands of trees per acre, and these forests become massive carbon sinks, pulling greenhouse gases from the atmosphere and locking them away for centuries. Scientists now argue that protecting and restoring redwood forests is a climate solution. Not the only one, but a significant one, with benefits that compound over time. Watershed protection, for another. The redwoods regulate water flow, filtering runoff, stabilizing slopes, preventing erosion. The root networks hold soil in place during storms. The canopy slows rainfall, allowing it to soak into the ground, rather than rushing downhill. The fog drip recharges aquifers and keeps streams flowing through summer droughts. Remove the forest, and the entire hydrological system destabilizes. And then there is the value that cannot be quantified. The sense of awe that washes over you when you stand among these giants. The peace that settles into your bones as you breathe this ancient air. The perspective that comes from placing your hand on bark that was already old when your great-great-great-grandparents were born. This forest is a cathedral, not metaphorically, literally. A place where the boundaries between self and world dissolve, where time slows, where the noise of modern life fades into something older and quieter. People come here to remember what stillness feels like. They come exhausted, anxious, overwhelmed by a world that demands constant motion. And they leave calmer. Not because the forest solved their problems, but because it reminded them that rest is ancient, that patience is possible, that even in sleeplessness, there is rhythm. You stand and brush the moss from your hands. The light is fading further now, the forest deepening into dusk. Somewhere above, the first stars are emerging, though you cannot see them through the canopy. The deer have moved on. The creek murmurs its endless song. The redwoods stand. And you, for this moment, are part of it all. The doe and her fawn have returned. You watch them from a distance, careful not to disturb. They move through the understory with the ease of belonging, pausing to browse on ferns, stepping over logs without seeming to notice the effort. The fawn is young, perhaps 3 months old, still spotted, still learning the forest's rhythms. The doe raises her head, ears swiveling. She has heard something you have not. For a long moment, she stands perfectly still, testing the air, reading invisible signs. Then she relaxes, returns to browsing. False alarm. Or perhaps not alarm at all, just the constant vigilance that keeps her alive. You settle onto a moss-covered log to observe. The forest at dusk is a different world. The animals that slept through the day are stirring. The animals that moved through daylight are finding places to rest. And in this transition hour, the two worlds overlap. A Roosevelt elk emerges from the mist. He is massive, 6 feet tall at the shoulder, antlers spreading like branches above his head. Each antler has 5 points, thick and heavy, built for battle and display. His coat is dark brown, shaggy, shedding in patches as summer transitions toward autumn. He moves with surprising quiet for something so large, stepping carefully around ferns, ducking beneath low branches. He is alone, unusual for elk, who typically travel in herds. But this is a mature bull, and the rut has not yet begun. For now, he is solitary, wandering his territory, eating enough to sustain his enormous body. The elk approaches a small clearing where sword ferns have been grazed low. He lowers his head and begins to feed, tearing at the tender fronds with his lips. His jaw works methodically, side to side, grinding vegetation between flat molars. An elk can eat 20 pounds of plant matter a day. In a forest as rich as this, finding food is not difficult. Finding enough food is a constant occupation. You watch him eat. There is something meditative about it. The slow rhythm, the complete focus. The elk is not worried about yesterday or tomorrow. He is here, chewing, swallowing, moving to the next patch of green. The doe and fawn notice the elk, but do not flee. Elk and deer coexist in these forests, occupying slightly different niches. Elk prefer the clearings and meadow edges. Deer favor the denser understory. Their territories overlap, but their needs do not compete. The fawn watches the elk with curiosity, taking a few tentative steps toward him. The doe makes a soft sound, not alarm, but caution. The fawn stops, reconsiders, returns to its mother's side. Lessons are taught this way, quietly, through observation and gentle correction. The light is nearly gone now. The forest has dimmed to shades of grey and deeper grey, the mist thickening as temperature drops. You pull your jacket tighter. The air has teeth now, that particular cold that comes from moisture and shadow. A spotted owl calls from somewhere in the canopy. 4 notes descending. Hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo! The sound is soft, almost tentative, like a question asked in darkness. Another owl answers from farther away, then silence. The owls are beginning their hunt, staking out territories, communicating across distances you cannot see. The doe has moved the fawn to a small depression beneath a fallen log. The fawn lies down, curling its legs beneath its body, tucking its nose against its flank. The doe stands over it, watchful, ears rotating like radar dishes. She will not sleep tonight, not truly. Deer are crepuscular, most active at dawn and dusk, but they remain alert through the night. Predators are always possible. Mountain lions still hunt these forests. Not many. Their populations are limited by prey availability and human presence, but enough. Enough that a doe with a fawn must always be vigilant. Enough that lying down, closing both eyes, surrendering to deep sleep is a risk she cannot afford. The elk has bedded down as well. He chose a spot on slightly higher ground, where he can see the approaches, where fog will not pool too thick. He folds his legs beneath him but keeps his head up, antlers silhouetted against the darkening sky. He chews his cud, a slow mechanical process of regurgitation and rechewing that helps him extract maximum nutrition from the cellulose he consumed. His jaw moves rhythmically, his eyes half close, but his ears never stop moving. You wonder what it is like to never fully rest, to always be listening for the snap of a twig, the rustle of brush, the silence that means something is moving through the forest with intent. To know that relaxation could mean death. The deer, the elk, they live in this state constantly, half awake, half alert, never surrendering to the vulnerability of deep sleep. And yet, they survive, they endure, they even thrive in their way. The owl appears, not the one you heard calling, a different one, silent, gliding between trunks on wings that make no sound. It is a spotted owl, medium-sized, its plumage mottled brown and white for camouflage against bark. It lands on a branch 15 feet above the ground, swivels its head to scan the forest floor, then goes still. Perfectly, utterly still. The spotted owl is one of the forest's most specialized predators. It hunts only in old-growth forest, requiring the complex structure of mature trees. The broken top snags for nesting, the dense canopy for cover, the abundance of flying squirrels and wood rats that live only in these ancient ecosystems. When the old growth was logged, the spotted owl's habitat shrank by over 90%. Now they are endangered. Fewer than 15,000 remain, and their numbers are still declining, pressured not just by habitat loss, but by competition from barred owls, larger, more aggressive cousins that have expanded their range from the eastern United States into the Pacific Northwest. The owl hunts, its head rotates, tracking something you cannot see. Then, without warning, it drops, a silent plunge from branch to ground, talons extended. There is a brief rustle in the leaf litter. The owl rises, something clutched in its feet, a wood rat, limp, dead, or dying. The owl returns to its perch and begins to feed. It is efficient, brutal, necessary. The forest runs on such transactions. The owl must eat. The wood rat's life fuels the owl's life. And when the owl dies, its body will feed beetles, fungi, bacteria, returning nutrients to the soil that will feed the trees, that will provide habitat for more wood rats. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is cruel. It simply is. The doe has heard the commotion. She stands rigid, head high, staring toward where the owl made its kill. The fawn stirs but does not rise. The doe waits, testing the air, determining if the threat is relevant to her. An owl is not a threat to deer, but the sound of predation is always worth noting. It means something is hunting. Something is alert. The forest is awake. After a moment, the doe relaxes slightly. She lowers her head to nuzzle the fawn, checking it, reassuring herself. The fawn makes a soft sound. Contentment, or perhaps just sleepiness. The elk has not moved. His eyes are open, watching the owl, but he shows no concern. Elk are too large for owls, too large for most predators except mountain lions. His vigilance is not about immediate danger. It is simply habit, the eternal watchfulness of prey animals. Ingrained so deeply, it is as automatic as breathing. The barred owl arrives. You hear it before you see it. A different call, louder, more aggressive. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? It lands on a branch 30 feet from the spotted owl. It is larger, bulkier, with dark eyes instead of brown. It surveys the territory with the confidence of an invader who has already won. Barred owls have been moving into spotted owl habitat for decades, outcompeting them for food, occasionally even killing them, hybridizing with them, and diluting their genetics. The spotted owl sees the barred owl. For a moment, neither moves. Then the spotted owl shifts, turning its body slightly, mantling its wings over its kill. A defensive posture. This is my food. This is my territory. The barred owl does not leave. Instead, it calls again. That rolling, aggressive question that echoes through the dark forest. It is a claim, a declaration. This forest belongs to whoever is strong enough to hold it. The spotted owl is not strong enough. It knows this. Barred owls are 20% larger, more adaptable, willing to hunt in a wider variety of habitats. In a direct conflict, the spotted owl would lose, so it makes a choice. It abandons its kill, spreads its wings, and vanishes into the darkness. Silent, quick, already hunting elsewhere. The barred owl drops to the ground, claims the wood rat, and begins to eat. You feel something tighten in your chest. It is not fair. The spotted owl evolved here, specialized over millennia to thrive in these ancient forests. And now it is being pushed out by a generalist species, through no fault of its own, because humans altered the landscape in ways that favored the invader. But fairness is a human concept. The forest does not deal in fairness. It deals in survival, adaptation, the ability to change or be replaced. The doe has pressed the fawn lower into its hiding spot. She has heard the owl's confrontation, heard the aggression in the calls. Even though owls are not a threat to her, The energy of predation is palpable. The forest is on edge. She stands over the fawn, rigid, scanning the darkness. Minutes pass. The barred owl finishes eating and flies away. The night settles back into quieter rhythms. But the doe does not relax. Not fully. Not yet. The spotted owl has found a new perch. You catch a glimpse of it deeper in the forest, settled on a broken-top snag, calling softly. Its mate answers from nearby. They have been pushed from their preferred hunting ground, but they have not been eliminated. Not tonight. The owl's survival depends on these old-growth groves remaining protected. As long as enough mature forest exists, as long as flying squirrels and wood rats have habitat, as long as broken snags provide nest sites, the spotted owl can persist. Not thrive, perhaps, not expand, but persist. And persistence is its own form of victory. The elk rises. He stands slowly, stretches, tests his legs. His stomach is full. The night is still. He moves toward the creek to drink, lowering his massive head, antlers dipping forward as he sips the cold water. The forest reflects in the creek's surface. Inverted trees, mist, a sliver of moon breaking through the canopy. The elk drinks, then raises his head, water dripping from his muzzle. He is at peace, not because there is no danger, but because he has learned to carry alertness without panic, watchfulness without fear. The fawn is asleep now, truly asleep, its breathing deep and slow. The doe stands guard, but even she seems calmer. The worst of the night's tension has passed. Dawn is still hours away, but the darkness feels less threatening.